Hello guys, welcome back to narsicloud.com. So far we have talked about a lot of scenarios under IAM. We have talked about how can users access resources in AWS, and we talked about various ways, using their credentials, using their password, and using their role, right? Today's goal is to talk about federation concept. Federation concept is basically that you're giving access to users who don't exist in AWS. So far, the user scenarios we talked about, those users exist within the AWS account. So basically they exist here. They exist here in AWS. But what happens, let's say we have a company, we have a lot of users within the company, and we are running on-premise at this point. So company decided that we want to move all of our resources to cloud. So let's say we want to move all of our stuff to AWS cloud. So we can deploy our applications. We will maintain all of our infrastructure in AWS. But we have a lot of users. So how could we give access to those users? Basically, those users should be able to deploy their applications to AWS here. And they should be able to log into AWS console. But eventually it comes down to how could they be authenticated and authorized, right? But we have already talked about basic ways of authentication and authorization using password and using if you want to log into console, we can use password. If you want to access the resources using API, we use access key ID and secret access key, and we can also access our resources by using role. By assuming role, we can access resources. So how could we apply those concepts here? What is the way that these users here can access AWS resources, right? And let's say that we have narsicloud company and we have lots of users, but for this demo we will take one of those users as a scenario. We want to give access to that user. Okay, let's say first of all, let's say we have user A. Okay, if user A wants to access resources, AWS needs to have some knowledge about that user, right? About that user authentication information, and authorization, whatever that information that AWS needs, right? Some way we have to give this information to AWS. There are a lot of ways, but one of the ways is using SAML. So basically, what we do is from this entity, I will show you what exactly is that. In this case, I'm gonna take Azure AD as an example. Let's say narsicloud is using Azure AD. That's where they're maintaining their users. Okay. In that case, what Azure AD does is it will give us SAML XML. So the SAML XML, which has all the authentication users information, everything related to that. Okay, so let's say it gives we download SAML XML here, so which is SAML XML. So what we do is first we give this information to AWS. So in AWS we have identity provider. Okay, under IAM you can create identity. You can create a provider, identity provider. So let's say we create a Azure provider here. Okay, Azure provider. So what we do here is we will upload the SAML in one of those steps. When you are creating the provider, you will upload that SAML. What happens? AWS stores that SAML. So that is registered as one of the identity providers under AWS. So at this point, AWS knows when we upload the SAML, at this point AWS knows what authentication and user information out there in narsicloud. Okay, so it has some knowledge, right? Let's say we want to access the resources using a role. Okay, so what we do using if we want to access a role, basically we create roles, right? So let's say we created one role under IAM, which is and for that role we give S3 full access. Okay, so basically this IAM role, we were attaching the policy with permissions S3 full access. Okay, but that role is right now it's just an entity. It doesn't have any meaning, right, unless we use it. So how could we use that role from our company, which is, for example, this user? How could this user can use that role? So we created this provider, right? What we do is, when we create this role under trust relationships, we establish a relationship between this provider and role. What does that mean? What we're saying AWS is, hey, this role can be assumed by this provider. So we established relationship here. So far good, right? And next step is, how do we access the AWS account? So this is all one account, right? So this is all one account. Under one account, we have all these services, AWS services. So for this user to be able to use this role, first of all, he should be able to see that role from here. Somehow in Azure application, in Azure console, he should be able to see that role. So to see that role, he should be able to list those roles. How does a user can list the roles? We can use one of the user's access key ID and secret. So at this point, we don't have any access key ID and secret. For role, wouldn't have it, right? He cannot use this role because in the first place, this user would not be able to see this role at all from this Azure application. Okay, so for that, what we do is we create one user here in AWS. So when we are creating user, we can give programmatic and console access for this user, or in this user we just wanted to see the roles, right? So we can just give programmatic access. So it will generate one access key ID, access key ID and secret. Okay, so now we got users access key ID and secret. So what we do, we use this guy, this user access key ID and secret, and we register that in Azure AD here. In under Azure, we register this under enterprise application. That's one of the steps. You can see all of that in demo, but this is the theoretical concept. Now this guy, this knows user's access key ID and secret. So when we create this user, what we do, we create a policy with permissions to just with one permission, which is listing out the IAM roles. What are the roles we have so far? S3, this guy, we have one role with S3 full permissions. So when we register this user here with access key ID and secret, this guy will be able to list the roles. So under Azure AD application, we can see the roles. So it will show this role here. So now we got access to our account and we're able to see the roles. What's the next step? All we have to do is we have to assign that role to this user, or if we have groups, we can assign that role to the groups. Okay, so now he will be able to see this role here. All we have to do is assign that assign that role to user. But this can also be associated to user group. So that's what we do usually in our companies. In this demo, I'm gonna take a user as an example, but usually we create all those users within a group, and we assign those roles to the group, so that any user can access to this can have access to this AWS console or AWS services using this role. Okay, so this is the theoretical concept. So let's get into the demo. Okay, so under demo, so we have this Azure AD Azure console, and this is the AWS console. Okay, so what is the first step that we do? First, we create identity provider here. So before that, we need to have SAML generated in Azure. So the first step would be that you would go to identity section here under Azure. You'll create an enterprise application. So here you got enterprise applications, and create new application. So what type of application you are connecting to? From Azure AD, which is in our company we're using Azure cloud, which is Azure AD, right? So we're connecting to AWS. So let's connect to AWS. So here we'll give AWS Azure app create. It will take a couple of seconds to get that created. Now set up single sign-on, right? So you click that. Like I said, there are different ways you can provide your authentication information to other cloud providers. So SAML is one of the best ways, that rich and secure authentication to applications using SAML. SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language Protocol. So we can dedicate a separate video for that, what is SAML and what kind of information does that contain, right? So select SAML, and you can click on that, or you can save later, that's fine. So here you got different sections: basic SAML configuration, attributes and claims. Let's not worry about those details for now. So let's download. So here you got Federation Metadata Xml. This is what which will have that authentication information. Okay, so roughly if you see that, so you'll see that it got first name and authentication information. It's an XML file. Okay, so we can go over that in a separate video. So what we can do now, let's add that file under identity provider. So we go to IAM, we go here identity providers. So let's add provider to Azure. So this is Azure identity provider, right? So Azure app. So we just created at this point. Okay, so that is valid XML. Click on add provider. So now we added the Azure authentication information here, right? So which is in the form of SAML. So far what we have done, now Azure has knowledge about this guy. Some user authentication information, it has that knowledge. Now what is the next step? We can create a role. So which is the role that user from Azure AD can use that role to access the resources, right? So let's go to the roles and create one role. What type of role it is? It is a type of SAML federation, right? So select the Azure under provider, and you can give programmatic and console access. So we chose that because this user from Azure AD from our company should be able to log into the console. At the same time, they should also be access resources programmatically. Okay, now select permissions. So let's select S3 full access. Okay, so whoever assumes that role they'll get that S3 access. So S3 access role. Okay, create role. So we created one role. Now, okay, this step is done. Still, this guy doesn't know anything about how to access these resources, and he doesn't even know how to get what kind of roles exist in this account. So for that, what we do, we create a user and give permission just to access roles, just to list out the roles. So gonna add user access. Okay, add user access, and we can give just a programmatic access, because this user we're not going to use that to log into the console. It is just to list out the IAM roles. So let's create a, so we got this policy. We can create a new policy also. Okay, so here, what kind of permissions we need to give? We need to give just to list out the IAM roles. So here, just to list down IAM roles, and here all types of resources. Okay, and close that. And we have policy and policy name, just list roles. Create policy. Let's go back here and refresh. Just list roles. So we're going to assign that policy to that user. Just review, create user. So make sure you download this CSV file, because we're going to copy this and use that under AD. So now we created this user, and how could we grab this user credentials and configure here so that Azure AD can access the roles, can see the roles, right? So let's go to provisioning, and so basically we need to provision that user here. So I copied access key ID and secret access key. Okay, now test connection. See, he's able to access now. Okay, authentication, user provisioning, configuration is done. So let's save that. Now let's start the provisioning process. So it will take a couple of minutes, and click on save. Yeah, so it's 100% complete, right? So you can see steady state achieved. So now how do we assign this role to the user? So right now let's go to users and groups and create a user here. So what we're doing is, we have our AD users, but we're gonna under this enterprise application, we're going to add one of those users here, right? So right now I have only one user. So if you have groups, you can see those groups and select those groups and assign these roles. Right now let's select this user, select that. See, do you see this role, S3 access role? Where is that coming from? That's coming from the roles that we created in AWS, right? See, S3 access role. How could Azure able to see that role? Because we provision this user using their access key ID and secret. Azure AD is able to see that role. That's why you're able to assign that role for this user. Let's assign that. So we assign this role. Now that's all. we have done all these steps. Now he will be able to log into AWS console using that role. So what we can do is we can test. So when you test it, now you would see one issue. Okay, so when you test it, what Azure does is it's going to make a request with the SAML information to AWS cloud. So in that SAML, it's going to provide all this role, session name, role, all of these attributes. Okay, so under role session name, now it is using user principal name. So if you go to users here, we go to users, this is the user we are using, right? Now what is my user principal name? This is kind of some junky name, right, with all hashes at, but AWS doesn't allow, it has some limits. We can use only alphabets and some of the special characters, but some of these characters are not allowed. That's why it will complain about that. So I will show you that, and then we can change this name, then we can retry. Okay, so go to enterprise applications, so Azure app, let's test it out. So when we test it, we can use sign in as current user, which is what the user logged into AWS Azure AD. See, by default it will show you this role. You can select that. You already see this issue here, right? When you sign in, it says okay, role session name in auth and response must match. So this is the error that coming from AWS, because the attributes that we are sending, they're not in compliance with the special characters. I have hash in that, right? So let's go back here, single sign on, and here you can, instead of sending our principal name, let's send demo. Okay, so just for demo purposes, you can send that name. That's it. Now if you go ahead and retry that, sign in as current user, see, now we're able to access this AWS console. Now what happened, after this assigning this role to this user is able to log into AWS console. So now we assign that role, right? So he can access S3 resources. So if you see here, it's using this S3 access role with the in principal name of add demo. Okay, you can create demo, all of that. You're not seeing any errors here. But if you go to other services, let's say EC2, that role doesn't have access to this, right? So that user won't be able to access any other resources. So yeah, that's the demo. See how easy it is. Basically we are able to give access to the users, to our users which are in our AD directory, active directory within our company, which is outside of AWS account. So this is called IAM Federation. So that's all guys for today. In our next video we will continue with other topics, and if you like this video, please click on like button, and please do subscribe. You will get to see a lot more videos on different technologies, on the latest technologies under narsicloud channel. Okay, see you guys later. Take care. Bye.